famous saying. I think the Scottish poet Robbie Burns was responsible about the best laid plans of mice and men. Well, the 1986 Castrol 500 proved that they can certainly go awry. There was a lot of talk prior to the race that Jim Richards, in his attempt to retain the Castrol Crown that he won here at Sandown last year, would only make one fuel stop, and even though they didn't have the pace of the other cars, that could be the telling factor. Well, it's not the way it turned out. And in fact, there are a lot of plans going awry, especially as far as the Volvo team were concerned. Robbie Francevic, the touring car champion, scratched just prior to the start. That's just a part of the drama, and it certainly continued from the flag, especially for the opening part of the race and right through to the checkered flag. Well, let's pick it up right at the start. With me in central commentary position, Will Hagan and Jim Murcott. They're away.
And it's a very even jump with the Nissans coming to the front. The Nissan heading Brock. Nissan's first and third. Brock sandwiched between them. And then in fourth place it's Grice. Fifth place Harvey. And then the traffic standing very hard on the brakes very early as they make sure they get a line. The Volvo's picked up about 6 placings in the hands of John Bow. But there's Fury, Brock, Seaton, and then Harvey. Let's have a look for the Volvo further back. Jim Richards is a good way back in the BMW. Look at him. He's about 12th or 13th. 3, 6, 9, 12. He's about 15th. Up the back straight. This is Grice on the second of the Nissans. Gary Scott. And he's gone. The Nissan, Gary Scott. And under brakes. Gary Scott's gathered it up again. And the lead car, George Fury, look at him on Peter Brock, the race leader. 129 laps, 503 kilometres, Grice is third, and Gary Scott somehow is still there and is fourth.
Well, we lost a few pre-race, Jim Murcott. We seem to lose a few in the opening half lap as well.
Well, what a remarkable piece of recovery there by Scott. It looked as if he'd collected the fence, collected a couple of other cars, but he's still in there fighting in his fourth position. I think we'll have an early pit stop for that car with some flat-spotted tyres, definitely.
And John Harvey's fifth, and behind him is Dick Johnson, and then it's Crosby.
See Scott's car looking the worse for wear. We've got 128 laps to go after this one's completed by race leader Peter Brock.
And here goes Fury for the lead, and I have absolutely no doubt that he'll do it. I think he'll do it easily. So as he comes around to complete lap one, Brock is very determined. And I think, on the other hand, that Fury is the one saying, well, if you want to do that, I'll force you into it. So the Nissan Gazelle, the third of the Nissan team cars, if you like, sharing the garage space there with the two Peter Jackson team cars into the pits, a quick 2-litre car. This again, the leading pair.
Already these two leading cars, Brock and Fury, have opened out a considerable gap on the third car.
And here's a bit of a blow for us. One of the BMWs.
It's Kevin Bartlett, Trevor Crowe. And last year, don't forget that Jim Richards pulled up on the track, solved the problem himself, and went on to win the races. Frank Gardner moves in to see what else can bedevil the JPS BMW team in the opening laps of the Sandown Enduro.
The question is, with that car, what is the problem? Meanwhile, Brock stretching his lead a little. Maybe Brock is expecting the 2 pit stops. It was a question whether they were going to try for one only pit stop, but Brock appears at this stage to have made up his mind to run as fast as he can and pick up the second pit stop.
Look at Brock using more curbs than you've ever seen him use before, and that is directly the result of his running in Europe. The pressure that's going to come on Brock will come when Fury gets the pressure from Grice in third, or that's one of the possibilities when Fury will start to become more determined to go to the front. He'll certainly do it, if he can do it without, as I say, over-revving the car, going too deep under brakes. But if Grice gets onto his tail, as into the pits goes the second Nissan, it flew off the back of that collection there from fourth place, from third place. That's, no, fourth behind Grice. And in the pits there, the car that was damaged on the opening lap, halfway round, Gary Scott front end in on the wheel probably. And it'll be the race tape to try and fix that and get it out again. But a non-standard problem always confuses the crews, because what do we do? Which part do we tack first? How do we solve the problem? Needs a bit of analysis as well as action.
A bit difficult to rehearse for something like this.
And even to get the bonnet open. Now checking the radiator as its teammate down the back straight on lap 4. Grice, watch him for pressure, and there's the other car. The qualified third fastest, just 0.11 of a second slower than the car that's now running round in second place. Gary Scott getting into trouble in a curious place, but on the other hand doing superbly to hang on to it and to continue racing.
As they go up the back straight, our leading three, it's Brock from Fury, Grice closing in under brakes.
We'll really see some fireworks now. Grice has caught these two front runners. Fury seems to be quite happy sitting behind Brock, but Grice certainly won't be happy sitting in third. He'll want to get out in front and show these drivers that he's number one. Mr. 10 Cents really coming up as a threat, sliding the car around, working very hard to get his position right up in front of the field.
Furious work going on Kevin Bartlett's car, the BMW, the second of the JBS BMW cars. It jammed in third gear. Kevin had no gears other than third. He's brought it back to the pits. He's been in already for 2 laps, and now they're putting the car away because it's obviously something that can't be quickly sealed.
Very bad luck for Kevin Bartlett, enjoying a chicken leg about an hour before the start. Felt very confident as we see Grice's car damaged in the left front too. Bartlett felt very confident about the reliability of the BMWs. A curious problem, but his teammate Jim Richards has now come up from being, and Fury in the lead. Fury leads Brock, as I really did think he was going to, and there's no question Brock won't take it without fighting, but the car that now leads has probably about a second up its sleeve at normal race pace. But 330 horsepower coming from the lead car that weighs just 1,035 kilos.
Whoa!
Whereas Brock, who was in a lot of trouble there on a lapped car, weighs 1,325 kilos.
Wave the flag, says Brock to the flag marshals. Wave the flag and get this Gemini out of my way and let me race. That was his arm out the window. The Gemini certainly didn't want to know about it, and nice big slide from Brock.
The skyline approaching that part of the circuit now as Grice goes underneath Brock. And working the tyres very hard early is Alan Grice.
And in the meantime, down towards the tail end of the field, George Fury's Peter Jackson teammate, Gary Scott, who dropped back with his pit stop to 31st place, is now up to 23rd place. So he's made a lot of progress, and there's a lot of time left, obviously, in which to improve.
And there's Scott in the second of the Nissan Skylines. Fury, #1 driver in the team, in second place.
This has been a tremendous recovery by Scott. Really sensational. I mentioned earlier that Jim Richards had made a pretty good run from 13th up to 4th place, but Scott was far worse off than that. John Bowe had done similar, but Scott's done the best of all of them.
Jim, you were impressed with him that he even managed to take hold of the car and keep it on the track and not go out on the first lap.
Well, it appears that he's slid the car along the front of the fence, but his recovery from that area was absolutely sensational piece of vehicle control. The car was travelling sideways up the road, and somehow he pulled it back, lost about 2 positions, and got around the corner.
45, and it's Peter Brock in the pits. First of his scheduled stops. 13 seconds gone for Peter Brock in the pits. Brock getting out, Alan Moffat getting in. The last churn of fuel now going in, ready at 21 seconds on fuel. Still on the front of the car. This is going to be a good stop. 25.7 seconds for Alan Moffat as he snakes out of the pits. And that is a great stop from the Mobile Holden dealer team.
So Moffat, thumbs in the air, and even some Ford fans cheering that one. They've been a bit quiet since we saw Johnson drop out, and Moffat goes back in 05, still in third place. Down in the pits prior to the race, and there was a bit of money changing hands down there. There's a sweep on as to who will do the fastest pit stop today. The Holden dealer team getting in early there.
Well, somebody set the standard already. That one's going to be tough to break.
Well, indeed. In fact, Richards is 1 minute now behind second-placed Grice, second-placed Fury at least, and sandwiched in between them after that pit stop is Alan Moffat.
Peter Brock, superb pit stop. How's the car going?
Oh, beautifully. Yeah, I was just explaining, like, my radio's not working quite correctly, so I was explaining to the boys what the message I was trying to get through to them, and the message, if they wish to give to Alan, which was, sit on that pace, there's nothing silly is happening. If I went much harder, I felt that that's a bit too fast for 129 laps.
Now, Moffat's just done a 1:53.5, and that was fairly unhindered. So Brock's been sitting on about 1 minute 53 neat. So Moffat's only at this stage half a second lap behind him, only after a couple of minutes on the track. Good going.
And in fact, behind them, behind Moffat, is 14.6 seconds to Jim Richards after the pit stop.
This is our leader, Alan Grice, on his 48th lap. Had the headlights on after about 20. Took over the lead at lap 12. So we've had 3 leaders of the race. Initially Brock for 5, Fury for 6. And taken over since lap 12.
Well, remember too that it's a 129 lap race, so half race distance is 65 laps. So any Commodore going for that sort of distance has a massive task, as Peter Brock says. They've got to do the next 17 laps on something a bit more than 17 litres, which is what I had left. And of course, at Brock's pace and consumption, would be quite impossible. Grice has got things worked out fairly well, but he should be down now. He'd have been using similar fuel, perhaps a touch more than Brock. So he's down to perhaps 10 litres remaining in the tank. 10 litres, 100 kilometres. It's 28 miles per gallon in road terms, and fairly achievable, not in a V8 Commodore though, even on the road. And in racing, it's more like 7 kilometres per gallon. And there's the man looking after us for the aerial shots. And if you'd like to swap Possie's places with him, you're more adventurous than I. Don't fancy that at all.
Now, if Crosby's car has only reached that far, any second now, Grice must be stopping.
Oh.
There he is. Up go the pneumatic jacks.
And Graham Bailey takes over. A very interesting stage in the race.
So does George Fury, because he, of course, is now the race leader. He's gone by. He was just 4.8 seconds behind Grice, who hands over now to Graham Bailey, the Newcastle chicken farmer whose company turns over $30 million a year. Massive business, Chickadee. A lot of wholesale supply. So it is now Fury leading. Still Grice is second. It's 45.63 seconds behind Grice, or behind Fury, to Alan Moffat after his pit stop in second place.
And that right-hand front won't come off by the look of it.
50 seconds gone on the Graham Bailey Alan Grice stop already. 53 seconds. This is worse than Crosby's. They can't get the front right-hand wheel on the car. Les Small, the race manager, working on the wheel himself, and it just won't lock on. More than a minute gone now. Grice has walked away in disgust. Small just can't get that wheel to lock on. The front right-hand wheel. Bailey in frustration inside the motor car. Finally it comes off. So it wasn't locking on. In fact, they couldn't get it off. Now the new tyre goes on. The crew a little bit disoriented. Move in with the central locking nut. This is the problem with these central locking nuts. They're saying to drop the car off its jacks, but they can't because they still don't have the locking nut on. Now finally they're right to go. And it's 1 minute 33.4 seconds. He's lost more than a minute over a normal pit stop.
Well, the situation after that is that 4 cars went through. George Fury, Alan Moffat, Jim Richards and Gary Seaton. Gary Scott. It's Glenn Seaton. And he's sharing with Fury. Well, so 4 cars, they're down to 5th.
Poor Alan Grice. How does he feel? He has worked his heart out here to trim a 1/10 of a second off here, to trim off a 1/10 there, to keep his laps down under 53s, and it's just all been blown because they've just lost an extra half a lap in the pits with one sticky front tyre.
What happened with the pit stop, Alan? The tyre wouldn't come off.
Yeah, I don't know the reason, but the wheel that was on the car when I came in was jammed on for some reason, and the gun wouldn't take it off. When that happens, it normally means that there's an air pressure problem or the gun's playing up, but in any case, it didn't go off, and we're in a fair amount of bother.
And George Fury, the question mark goes to when he'll pit. 65 laps is half race distance. He's on his 53rd. That's the race situation, and in fact, Moffat was just taking his car past the Graham Crosby car, now with Wilkinson driving, and that's in 6th place. So the lead is not very many cars unlapped in this race.
Or will when the time comes. That's what they're hoping.
It's 50.8 seconds from Fury back to Alan Moffat. But of course, a pit stop to come, and here comes the pit stop for 3rd place, Jim Richards. He will hand to Tony Longhurst as a firebrand at the wheel.
What a disaster for the JPS BMW team. They're in way long before their half-distance calculation. Frank Gardner, the team manager, says they've got a tyre problem which has forced them in. I've seen the back tyres come off and don't see a problem with either of those. Jim Richards is getting out. Tony Longhurst in the motor car. This is going to be a quick stop nonetheless, but not as quick as Brock's. 28.88 seconds. The car stalled, probably closer to 30 seconds. But a disaster for the JPS BMW team. We'll now have to wait to see whether it's possible that they can get right to the end of the race without another stop, but frankly, I doubt it.
Best laid plans. 41.02 seconds. 41 seconds from Moffat in 2nd place to Gary Scott, now 3rd. And yes, car number 2, the Graham Bailey car, went past also, so that the BMW was 5th when it came back out of the pits.
And
Plenty of smoke there from the Commodore. Is it Moffat or is it the Harvey car?
And in fact, it's Fury coming up to lap Graham Bailey, and Moffat in trouble.
that was the car running at slower laps. Maybe was it the pit stop that caused the problem?
Oh, left front flat.
So 52 seconds was the gap between Fury to Moffat, and with Fury about to come in for a pit stop, it would have been expected that Moffat could have really closed the gap, but now he'll have to go in himself.
So the JPS BMW in early, now the Mobile Holden dealer team Commodore going in early too. An extra pit stop potentially, certainly a lot of time wasted on this lap. It's happened with 9/10 of the lap still to be covered. It'll probably take him 4 minutes or thereabouts. Into the pits now.
Once again, a good pit stop, a good job done, thwarted and frustrated by a little mistake or a little problem.
Okay. The problem with Alan Moffat's car is a front left-hand tyre. The tyre has gone flat. That's why Moffat's come into the pits. There's confusion down here because the Gary Scott car, the Nissan, is right next door. Moffat has to be pushed back to be be able to get round the Scott car. Moffat has lost 23.39 seconds in the pits, but it was because of a front left-hand tyre. Now, the Scott car is in. Terry Shield, the relief driver, is in the motor car. This is the damaged car around the front area. This is a scheduled pit stop. I think Fred Gibson, the team manager, is using it to gauge fuel consumption to discover just what George Fury is capable of doing, but he's aiming to keep Fury out. And we look behind us, and now all of a sudden John Harvey is in the pits as well. Harvey getting out of the car, Neil Lowe getting in. Boy, oh boy, the pit people down here are busier than one-legged frogs in a snake pit. This is some action. Harvey's stop is a scheduled stop. That is scheduled given that he's already been in once already because the front sway bar on the left-hand side fell off early in the race.
Well, this has been a great effort, not just by George Fury, but by the whole Peter Jackson Nissan team. The development of that car, a year out of racing last year to develop it, and did they ever know what they were doing under the guidance of Howard Marsden? There's Graham Bailey showing a very different situation to what Alan Grice did when he was driving the Chickadee Commodore. A brand new car at the beginning of this year, not the car that Grice has been using in Europe. That is Graham Bailey's car, brand new from the Roadways organisation earlier in the year, built by Les Small. And Bow finding a way round him. And you see the jerkiness, the Bailey not so used to somebody coming by, and not so smooth in letting him find or giving him a bit of track to use. But the Nissan team, as I say, stayed out last year, developed the car on behalf of Nissan Japan, told them what the specification needed to be for the homologation papers. They built the parts and so on, the gear ratios they needed, had them homologated, came out racing this year, and in, 7 months has become the car to beat over the Volvo Turbo that's been developed in Europe over a number of years, over the Commodore that's been an ongoing race car for many years, and this Australian development by Nissan in Melbourne, and now the effort taken over by Fred Gibson has been quite outstanding. So this is the dice for second and third. 1 lap behind the leading car, but with a pit stop to come for it. Moffat, Bailey, as you can see, about as quick as Moffat through the slow stuff, and that's typical of a less experienced driver. They can be quick on the slow stuff. Where a good driver is quick is on the really fast-flowing corners, something in a car like this, I suppose, above about 160, 180 kilometres an hour, and that's when the not so experienced drivers, yes, they grit their teeth a little bit and their palms get a bit sweaty. But the people like the Brocks and the Moffats and the Richards and co just love it, as into the pits, just short of the half distance at the end of lap 63. Goes the race leader, George Fury, in the Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline Turbo.
Lap 63, and George Fury is into the pits, ready to hand over, and in fact already doing so, to his young teammate Glenn Seaton. This has got to be a perfect stop for the Nissan team. Fred Gibson, the team manager, is delighted that the car has got to 63 with reserve, he says, which means that he believes this is the only stop the car will take in this event. The team was practicing its pit stops all morning, and it's been perfect. 26.66 seconds, unfussed, relaxed, and Glenn Seaton has now gone out with the weight of the world on his shoulders to keep the Nissan team in the lead in this long distance Castrol 500.
In fact, all that's happened there is that the 3 cars behind it have come up onto the same lap, but it has retained its lead. The race lead is still the George Fury car. Now Glenn Seaton from in car number 2, Bailey from Moffat, from Richards and from Gary Scott.
George Fury, congratulations. What a great race that Nissan's putting up.
Yeah, it's a good little car, isn't it? The car's performing very well. Gricey's been going well, but I think our car with the 1 stop is going to last out well. Glenn's a good driver. He'll do the same times as I will. So all in all, I think if the car holds together, we're looking very well.
So the race continues for second spot. Moffat holding it from Bailey.
Glenn Seaton has to, in much easier traffic conditions than the opening laps of the race, There's more spread out. There's not the same furious dicing. And where George Fury did 64 laps, he now has to, and 1 lap down.
In fact, they would have unlapped themselves, wouldn't they, while Seaton was taking over in the car. So the first 3, in fact 4, on the same lap. As we're in the pits again, and this is the Volvo dealer team. The changeover, as out goes John Bowe, and Alfredo Costanzo takes over.
Alfredo Costanzo has done 3 laps in that motor car around Sandown. That's his total practice time. And he said that included the lap out from the pits and the lap slowing down to come into the pits. And his words when he got out of the car were, in his very strong Italian accent, "I'm very confused."
The Jim Keogh BMW. It's out on the curb to allow those 3 through. And in the sand trap, Michael Quinn, John Faulkner, Corolla. Not going too far without some assistance.
Don't worry about pushing, chaps. You will never move that. You will absolutely, and the more you try, the further it goes.
And that was the leader in the 2-litre class. About 195 horsepower now out of that little Toyota engine, twin cam 1600.
At this stage, you would probably prefer to have about 24-inch ground clearance, tall tyres and knobbly tall wheels and knobbly tyres.
Out comes the old tube, the bag. Try and go back on, get a bit of traction.
The next movement is to wrap this around the brakes and the axle, and then you really multiply the problem.
Yes. No, John Faulkner has got no chance of getting that car out of that situation with what he's got there.
Can't you do something?
The frustration of the driver is very obvious. Again, he can see the seconds ticking away.
Seem to have sorted out any turbo problem that might have been there from the Amaru meeting that perhaps have put question marks on the reliability of the Nissan Skyline.
The good part about this sort of a situation is that you get so much advice. And of course, it's guaranteed that every second piece of advice will be totally contrary to the one you just previously had. The driver usually helps by something like saying, well, if you blokes had just lifted a foot off the ground and we'll put some bricks under it, you know. Everybody gets totally illogical and frustrated. And they're not far from success. They're there. Well done. 6 people plus the driver. They lifted it sideways. And, well, quite an achievement, because we've certainly seen cars into sand traps that have never moved again before the tow trucks arrived as the days got dark.
And there's a Commodore that's gone off. It's one of the, it's the Lusty car. Don't know which Lusty was at the wheel. Graham or Ken. Either way, they've been perhaps too lusty on that corner.
Well, no, it was blowing its engine as it came down the straight just a little while ago. It was, instead of the oil staying in the sump and circulating, it was being
Marshall's
burnt.
backing off very quickly there.
That's Graham in the car. Brother Ken's got out.
So, not very long ago, down at the end of the main straight, we saw this action in the Mulver Hill Commodore.
Tony, jump on the brakes, lock it up, oil in the sand trap.
Great credit, he knew where he was going. I suppose the people in the pits watching their watches initially to see what sort of times Glenn Seaton was doing, but they know that he can do the times. It wouldn't have come as any surprise to see him doing similar times to George Fury. So as I say, what they're really looking at in the pits now is hoping for the scourge of turbocharged powered cars, their problems, and that's the Kevin Bartlett Trevor Crowe JPS BMW that has had its second gearbox after locking in third gear and is obviously parking again. But yes, what they'd be hoping for is that this car gives problems. But so thorough has the Nissan team preparation been. If I sound a fan, I'm only seeing it as the team has done it. And after they won Surfers, the following day, because they broke a drive line on the start, they went and did a 1,000 kilometre test. Let's have a look here at Trevor Crowe, Kevin Bartlett's car number 9. Never looked like a line to go around that corner.
bouncy bounce.
Race situation. So well over half distance. The in-between drivers in the cars at this stage, and David Ratcliffe, Don Smith. Don Smith.
Three-wheeling's not the trick.
Car 15 fighting for third place. So Terry Shield has made up the small gap to Graham Bailey. Third place Bailey, second place Moffat, and fourth place Shield. So this is a good one. The Nissan's first and fourth as we see one of the Capri V6s out in the dirt. Netcom entry of a two-car team, and they're a long way further in than the Toyota Sprinter was.
A few people are very reluctant to leave the hospitality tent there to lend a hand, I think.
If you double the number of persons trying to shift the car and start bouncing it instead of trying to roll it, maybe you'll get somewhere.
There's another opinion that's been thrown into the ring, coming from Jim Burkott.
Yes. And we've lost Bailey. Bailey's gone back a spot to fourth. So Terry Shield comes up. He's in third place now. Traffic helped him, and the team leader, the race leader, tucked in behind them as well.
Nissan want a first and second result here today, and have instructed Shield really to go for it.
Yes, this has been a stunning performance. Of course, it can all still fall apart. Absolutely no guarantees, but just the speed that they've shown so far, the fuel consumption, the organisation in the pits has really made them the team to beat without any shadow of a doubt. It's felt that George Fury feels he can beat his 2 minutes 13.8 second lap at Bathurst, done in the Bluebird Turbo. He can beat it in this Group A Skyline Turbo. Theoretically a less developed car, but one that's proving with sorting and so on to be faster generally. I mean, that's the case with Group A, as with the Commodores. That's the race situation, and most of the vehicles involved in this we're in our picture at the moment, but finding that the Group A cars are starting to beat Group C times, have done so at quite a number of circuits. So now he goes forward further. John Harvey, he's a long way back actually. Harvey in car number 3, as in the pits. Here's Alan Moffat. It's a handover to Peter Brock.
Up with the
so that will make the Skyline team 1-2 as they go past us. It's Nissan's first and second. Moffat will now have dropped back into fourth place.
The second scheduled stop for the Peter Brock Mobile Holden dealer team, and Brock's out in another wonderful time, less than 25 seconds. Unfortunately, Alan Moffat, with that unscheduled stop for the front left-hand tyre being flat, has caused the team to drop back. But now, with Brock out and with his attitude exactly right, we're going to see fireworks from Peter Perfect.
And fifth place now is Peter Perfect, with Richards having gone through as well. So he's got the job in front of him. The prediction has come from John Smales. Fireworks from this man.
And they are presently in fifth place.
Wrestling the car around on cold tyres, on fresh cold tyres.
And a flurry of activity in the pits now as Larry Perkins' car comes in with David Parsons at the wheel. He hands over to LP. This is likely to be their last stop as well. Certainly it was the Brock team's last stop, and Grice won't be far behind, I'm sure. Whistles blow. Second churn of fuel is in. Problem with the front left-hand wheel. Finally locks in. And Larry Perkins smokes out of the pits, almost taking out the rear of the Colin Bond Alfa Romeo as he goes, but a bad stop, 47.68 seconds.
And now it's Graham Bailey into the into the pits, so it's a sprint for John Smales to get down to the Chickaday Roadways pit. And Grice to take back over from the car owner Bailey.
And wandering down there is George Fury in the hat there with his hands in his pockets. Doesn't look like the co-driver of the car that's leading the race. As blasting out comes Alan Grice.
Now we'll see some action.
Ah dear. O'Brien in the Bob Jane T-Mart's BMW. Charlie O'Brien, the car he's sharing with Gary Rogers, and they're desperately trying to find a bit of non-muddy ground where they can get up the rise a little bit.
That's Gary Rogers.
It is Gary Rogers, open face helmet. He's trying to swing it round, use momentum to get it out of the grass, but it's pretty frustrating. He's made it now. Peter McLeod's car giving problems.
Wrestling with the gear change here. Gear selection problems, obviously.
And these are the retirements. We saw Francevic, McRae scratch their car from the start after a high-level meeting about 30 minutes before the start. Dick Johnson's blown his gearbox. Holden and Cutchy gone out in one of the small cars. Kay and Thompson as well, Ratcliffe and John Smith. We heard him explain what had happened to his car. Crow and Bartlett, more significant among the front runners. The third gear problem, a gearbox change, but then later retiring again. The Lusty car, you saw that, had been blowing smoke, got out in the grass and has now parked it. And then John Smith and Drew Price. In fact, I'd named too many Smiths around with Ratcliffe, but it was John Smith explaining what had gone wrong with their Toyota Sprinter. Let's have a look at this one. Commodore in a pile of trouble.
Larry Perkins.
And handled well. And Larry looking down the road and then starting to wonder who he's going to collect. But he hung on to it and threw it right round, and it expired in sort of a whirlpool there, coming onto itself.
Certainly he didn't want to land in the sand trap and require the assistance of 43 adults to get out.
Well, you saw second just disappearing from a picture, the Nissan Skyline. Terry Shield at the wheel. Here's the race leader. Seaton driving. So only one car hasn't been lapped. And that's the teammate of Glenn Seaton. And here's Perkins after the excursion.
So that's the gap all the way forward to this car that leads the race. So all but a few seconds of a lap lead being held by George Fury and Glenn Seaton over Gary Scott and Terry Shield. Third place, Peter Brock, Alan Moffat. So it's two Nissan Skyline turbos from the Holden Commodore V8. Charlie O'Brien, Gary Rogers' cars recovered, running in front of the race leader on the track. And really, if you have worried about Nissan reliability in the past on the racetrack, well, there's a convincing demonstration of it here. But with the front end of the car fairly extensively smashed, the car has continued to run like clockwork despite the damage. Here we are, race leader, Wilkinson.
Third gear. Into fourth.
Car 6 in 6th place. Car 30 in first.
George is now in 5th gear. Braking hard, a shallow line. Back to 3rd. He's really offline there. Brakes hard. Back to 2nd in the Nissan for this tight little S-bend. Not hitting the curbs too hard. 2nd gear again for the entry onto the back straight. Quickly into 3rd. Way through there by the Toyota. 4th gear now. Winding it up on the uphill back straight. Now it's hard on the brakes and back to second gear for the corner that really comes back. Briefly into third gear. Back to second now for Glenn Seaton. It's right on the tail of the Brian Bolwell BMW with Tony Farrell as co-driver. Tony in the car at the moment. Into third now for Glenn for this sweeper. Catching up to the Capri. Second gear again. Being thrown around a fair amount. No wonder Larry Perkins couldn't keep his times going without a seatbelt. Second gear still for the old Dandenong Road corner under the Winfield sign. Back to third. A little shoot of flame. Second gear now for a right-hander, brushing the curb on the left and the right, touching the dirt perhaps, not that time, and into the main straight.
A lap around Sandown with Glenn Seaton and Jim Murcott.
And Peter Brock, 0-5. He's was third place.
Not so perfect?
No, sir. No. He said, yesterday I was as happy as a sandboy. I enjoyed my qualifying lap. The others were tensed up having to report to team captains and so on. He said, I was just doing what I enjoyed. But car 15 was already in front of him. The cars behind him were Grice in 2, Richards in 1. So we'll get a check on how much time that cost Brock and what it meant in terms of positions in just a moment. Peter Brock, about whom a lot has been said in recent times about these polarizers in which he's interested, in which he says mean a lot to a car's performance if you carry them in a car. I've talked to him at some length about it and got details from him on it. And he said you get vibrations and frequencies in the car, as indeed you do, going through suspensions, in the bodywork and so on, and engineers indeed do spend a lot of time tuning those out. Peter Brock says if you use my polarizer, it does it for you, emitting lots of different frequencies. Whether he's right or whether he's wrong is yet to be proved, but certainly there are plenty of skeptics doubting him. Peter Brock says it has been more important in my life for the last year than the motor racing. And he said, I don't mind more or less what happens here.
That's been on the infield from Brocky. It'll cost him about 13 seconds. He's been running around 53.5 seconds per lap. A fairly harmless spin, but something that cost him 13 seconds all the same.
Harvey trying to use the curbing to straighten the car. He wants to arrive at the curbing not so fast that he rides over it. He wants to arrive there fast enough that he just uses the curbing as a little bit of added resistance to straighten the car up. And that helps ease his problem. So that's what he's trying for at each corner. Grabbing third and half turns of lock and grabbing them very, very quickly because he needs them right now.
These are the sort of days when the driver's saying to himself, why the bloomin' hell do I really want to do this?
Well, it's the sort of days too when drivers earn their money. As George Fury's in.
The youngest man in the motor race, Glenn Seaton, and leading the event, is in for his security stop. 4.5 seconds, but look, he's taken the bottle with him. They're running after it. That's the waste bottle that actually catches any overflow. And it was one of, it was the Network Alpha team that raced ahead, pulled off the bottle for the Peter Stuyvesant team. Well, there you go. They were ahead by a lap, and for the sake of saving 1 second, they lost about 30.
Dunlop Bridge repositioned from the old days with his tight right and left. Round past the pit entrance there and a little bit of a left-hand kink and onto the straight. And look what the chopper's doing. And the intrepid cameraman to stay with this and trying to keep in touch with a turbocharged car down the straight. It turns hard left, a short straight now. Down to this right and left, down towards the old Peters or Arco corner, Castrol corner these days. One of the tight corners on the track left, onto the back straight. Old existing part of the racetrack.
And a full 360-degree turn for the chopper on that bottom corner and then up the back straight.
And then
it's not just a matter of following the cars and going in the same direction as them.
It's a very busy time. And they, of course, I understand, as they turn hard left, the cars, now the chopper can sort of wait for them, but again, he's got to spin and spiral. And my understanding of it is that they are the hardest aircraft of all to fly because you're flying them every instant that you're in the air. They don't sort of glide along on wings or anything. You get a great view of the tightness, the way the circuit switches back on itself. This tight infield section, which was the bit added to the Sandown track to bring it up to an international accepted race length of 3.9 kilometres around, down the bottom, Dandenong Road corner, and again rejoining the traditional track. And here we are back at Dunlop Bridge. Roger Dundas, the man doing that job so superbly in the ABC chopper.
This is really an attack from Bryce. Bryce using every trick he can. He's got a master to beat. No point really attacking these couple of corners unless Brock makes a little mistake. Covering that inside line.
The 05 Commodore looking pretty wide to Alan Grice at the moment. Might see some daylight somewhere here.
Just a couple of horsepower will do wonders for either car in this situation.
This for them is lap 108. The race leader's on 110. He's completed 109.
John White pointing them through and his little Gemini. Here will be the fun, the end of the main straight.
And Grice down the inside.
Had the pick of the spots.
And the crowd go wild in the main stand.
Taking a wide line, he's going to try and go through. Can't quite squeeze it. Grice moves back across. Now, if Brock can tuck in behind, he'll get a drag up the hill. If there's just a bit left in the engine, or will Brock leave it?
He hasn't got it. Look, the car's not staying with Grice under acceleration.
No,
it's nowhere near it.
No way.
Grice is romping away.
Well, one man who knows the true meaning of anxiety at the moment is Nissan team manager Fred Gibson. Fred, 20 laps to go. You must be feeling pretty terrible.
Still a long way to go, John, isn't there, really? Now, it's been a good day for us, a good race so far, so I hope we can last another 20 laps.
Well, it was looking all desperate there from lap 1 when Scotty had his problem.
Yeah, Gary's come back well. He drove a terrific stint in the car, and Terry's done a super job also to come back from where they were, which they were back in about 15th spot. So we've come back in the second spot. We've really, the team's worked well as a pit stop. We've changed the compound tyres on Terry's car, and we've put a churn of fuel in for safety, and we're leading Alan Grice by 27 seconds at present.
Grice is using just every inch that he can find here. He's up on the curbs on the outside. He's bouncing off the inside. And using every inch there, touching the curb right and right again, sweeping into the main straight, squeezing every ounce of energy into the car before the run into the straight.
George Fury's gone for a bolt. He's passed Gary Scott.
Obviously,
And
the
Alan
radios and the cars
Grice's
are working.
gap, 23.54, a second gained. Yes, you can see there. Race leader now leads on the track as well.
Well, a second, the lap still wouldn't get him up there to take third place, would it? What's the gap between second and third at this
It's
time?
23.54, so a second gained at last lap by Alan Grice. But it really doesn't need to get critical. They'll give away a second a lap for 16 laps, 16 seconds. That still leaves you with 9 in front at the end. They'll be prepared to let Grice gain a small margin, as long as it's not a big enough margin per lap, to be there in front at lap 129.
But Grice would be going for broke anyway, whether he was 3rd, 4th, 10th or 93rd at this stage of the race.
And here's Alan Grice, the man chasing second place, but with an almost impossible task.
22.8 seconds the gap.
Lap 117 is the leader. Glenn Seaton, Graham Bailey and Alan Grice in 3rd place, in fact, at the moment, behind the other Skyline.
And has something happened with car number 15 in 2nd place?
Well, earlier, but
Seems not.
seems to be still circulating. All right, there was some concern that perhaps Shield was having problems in 2nd place.
He's 3.67 seconds behind the race leader, and he's... oh, yes, it's a flat, is it? It's a lock up there, and it was going to tip itself up onto 2 wheels. He's got some sort of a curious problem, and a fairly severe one.
Soon he leans on it.
So Grice's idea of
The angle
pressuring
on
the
that
car is a good one.
left front wheel doesn't look quite right.
Oh, the car is hopping and skipping everywhere. He sure has got a problem. This is 2nd place under enormous threat. It's the left front.
22.9 the gap on last check.
Isn't it the left front that's leaning out?
Yes, that's where the tyre smoke was coming from.
And that was where they had their problem earlier, after the accident, that they had to do some body work in there.
Maybe the solid blow of the shunt up there on that early lap is has settled into a bit of fatigue and caused a problem on the suspension.
Fred Gibson saying, "Damn you, Smales." A lovely bloke, Freddie Gibson. Coming round to complete 127. So 3.9 is 7.8 kilometres from 503. Is 495 kilometres completed. A fair part of the job in a 500k race. Their lead over on the track is a lap and 7.55 seconds over their 2nd team car, this battered looking monster, and its lead over Alan Grice in 3rd is 11.18. So it's still not coming fast enough for Alan Grice, but look at the man work. This is lovely to watch. We need race drivers and we want people who have a go, and Grice is certainly one of those.
Fury still has the Glenn Seaton still has the pace running here. He's only eased off a little bit, probably knocked a few revs off, probably started braking a little bit earlier, but he's still going in 1 minute 54.5 seconds per lap, and he's going to do it easy.
Nissan's a fair way back in the Endurance Championship, and this will not be a good enough result, even the 1-2. I don't think I'll have to work the points out in a moment, but they started 20 points behind BMW. They were in 3rd place in the series, 48 points to 28, with Alpha Sandwich between them on 36. And Richards, compared with George Fury, same thing, 48 to 28 points. So certainly Fury won't catch Richards. And we'll work out for you whether Nissan will catch BMW.
Into the main straight, Fury's car with Glenn Seaton driving it still sounds sweet as a nut. Last lap now.
A great drive, this one. Popped off 1st and 2nd grid position. They would have occupied the front row, but for an electric flying lap by Peter Brock yesterday that took him from 3rd to 1st grid position. But it didn't take very long for them to sort out the Holden and the Mobile Holden dealer team challenge. And since then, they've run like clockwork, tremendously competitive despite that initial error from Gary Scott on the opening lap, and it really has become a clean sweep. Early yesterday, it was fairly obvious that the Volvo challenge, the Volvo Turbo to the Nissan Turbo, was evaporated when they missed the first practice session, then they missed the second. Commodores appeared to be in with a chance, but they're a heavy car on a stop-start sort of a track, and it was a big job for them. Dick Johnson out with the Ford Mustang fairly early, and really I think his heart's set in the Sierra, and the sooner he sees it, the sooner he'll be happy. The BMWs, counting on one pit stop, had to make two, but weren't on the pace anyway of these cars. And it's been a great effort, not only by the drivers, but if you like, by Australia, because it's Australian mechanics, engineers, team managers that have done the whole effort on behalf of Nissan Japan, and it's been superlative. And they're coming round to win the Castrol 500 race at Sandown. It's the third round of the Australian Endurance Championship. They won the second. They blew up when very well placed in the first at Amaru Park. Waiting for the team, the second placed car, is Glenn Seaton. So the two cars over the line together, first and second. And it's first place to number 30, George Fury, but the car being driven presently by Glenn Seaton. Second place, a lap down to Gary Scott and Terry Shield. He too, Shield driving the car at this moment, but a sweeping victory for the Peter Jackson Nissan team over in third place. Alan Grice and Graham Bailey. Bailey particularly doing a grand job, and Grice going down like a fighter. And there he is. And what do you reckon the heart of that 21-year-old would be like in car number 30 at the moment? Fourth place has gone to Peter Brock and Alan Moffat. Not yet. Yes, they have crossed the line for fourth. Fifth place to Jim Richards and Tony Longhurst, one lap behind them. And sixth place, a further lap back to Graham Crosby and Wayne Wilkinson.
Glenn, was it as trouble-free as it appeared from the grandstand?
Actually, it was fantastic. The cars didn't have a moment's problem all the way. George, who really made the race for us, who done a brilliant job, and I really only sort of backed him up, but it went all well for the Peter Jackson Nissans. And the circuit was in top form, and all the competitors were great. Well,
judging by the perspiration, looks like you have had to work pretty hard out there, though. Just how tough is the circuit?
Oh, it's a very tight circuit. A lot of twisty parts where you go back and forward, right and left all the time, but after a while you get used to it, and it's just comes to you after a while.
Well, can you stop your thoughts from getting to Bathurst?
I hope we have a good run like we did today, really. I can't see why we can't, because the car is so reliable. We haven't had a problem all year, except for a couple of turbos sometimes, but we think we'll fix that problem.